there are some things that need to be said. And for me today, I'll have to say them about old friends because you deserve the truth and access and friendship. All of these things are secondary to what's most important in this moment, which is the country. This is the warning. I am one of 74 million Americans who voted for Kamala Harris. We did not support Donald Trump, but there are many of us. We are unrepresented right now. Where is our voice in Washington, D.C.? Who will rise up and say no to the insanity we are watching unfold? Donald Trump campaigned repugnantly. He campaigned as a fascist. And yes, it's the appropriate word. Every single thing he has done, with the exception of the appointment of his chief of staff and the nomination of Marco Rubio, has indicated he will govern as radically as he campaigned. Yesterday, the Trump transition confirmed that the U.S. military will be deployed domestically and that it will build massive camps to house, who knows, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million people. It was on that day when Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough told the country that they had gone to Mar-a-Lago to sit down with Trump.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump.
And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
Joe and I realize it's time to do something different, and that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
And this, of course, drew widespread, immediate reaction, laughter, and condemnation across a broad medium spectrum. For once, people who virulently disagree with each other were in agreement. Here's a taste of Megyn Kelly reacting.
Go yourselves, you dishonest jokes of faux journalists. What an absurd farce that was.
Sometimes people get caught up in the condemnation and the pile-on. We shouldn't do that in this case. This is important. What happened? Joe Scarborough knows his history, and he surveyed Donald Trump's statements and actions over a decade. And he looked into the camera and he told his audience probably the most serious and damaging thing you could ever say out loud about another person in politics.
This is not a reach. I could go back and talk about Nazi Germany, and I do it without any concerns whatsoever. And if people can't start drawing the parallels, well, you're just stupid, or you have your head in the sand, or you're one of them.
I know every time when I talk about the Third Reich and I talk about the lessons of that era and apply it to Trump's incipient fascist movement, I try to do so carefully with precision. Joe Scarborough has done the same. It is clear that he looked and he processed and he decided that Trump was beyond just a radical, that he was beyond just an extremist, that he had entered a territory where it was fair, where it was appropriate, and this is the most important part, absolutely and urgently necessary to compare Donald Trump to the fascists of the 1930s. Trump has done nothing to dissuade anybody since his election that he will not govern precisely as he campaigned. Jesus had it right about being the first to pick up the stone. Joe Scarborough's picked up a lot of stones, and he's tossed them pretty hard at Marco Rubio.
Marco, like these other people, all because They want to cozy up to Donald Trump and maybe be his vice president.
That's it.
They degrade themselves and they slander America.
And Nikki Haley.
Everybody has to make a choice. And in 2024, Nikki Haley could have made the choice that a lot of conservative Republicans have made. Don't go along with the authoritarian. Don't go along with the guy that wants to amass more power in the White House and more power in Washington, D.C. than any president in American history. So her choice is support an authoritarian.
He attacked them for their moral capitulations, for their cynicism. He questioned their motives. He questioned their intentions. From my perspective, much of it was deserved, and I've done the same thing. But I suspect the difference between us is I meant it, and he didn't. One of the things that the American people rejected in this election was the performative cynicism of the Washington, D.C. media. The American people voted against them as much as they voted against Biden, as much as they voted against everything. People are so sick and tired of the condescension, of the bullshittery, and the meanness that flows down on them from network television. What is the appropriate reaction for somebody who believes the person that they're talking about, the American Hitler, has just been elected to the American presidency with both houses of Congress? How would they act if he then appointed someone as unqualified as Pete Hegseth, someone as morally rancid as Matt Gaetz, someone who's as big a dupe as Tulsi Gabbard, somebody as sadistic as Kristi Noem? What would they say? Would they speak out with conviction? Would they lead the charge? Or would they capitulate to it? Would they genuflect to power? The truth of the matter is, the word on the street is that Joe and Mika are scared to death of Trump. And boy, did they look it in their humiliation. Now, when they spoke to the camera and they made their case about their abandonment of principle and their justifications for why it is suddenly 2 weeks after the election, they're at Mar-a-Lago for the first time since the New Year's Eve party, they thought about what to say. Practiced it, recorded it, checked it off with staff and each other, and then the moment came and they did it. Now, there are two other things that need to be said. Journalists, the hosts of the most important, in their words and in their network's words, arguably public affairs show in the country, cannot become comfortable with power in the way that Joe and Mika have become comfortable with power. John Meacham is a regular on the Morning Joe set. From there, he's functioning as a Biden advisor and a speechwriter without ever declaring it to the audience. Journalists, like anybody, are attracted to the idea of being in the room, in the middle of the excitement. It's a narcotic. It's an aphrodisiac. It's heady stuff when the president of the United States calls you and asks you for your opinion, asks you for an idea. What should I say? Where should I go? What should I do? It's the ultimate hit of adrenaline. And you can tell Joe Scarborough and Mika love it more than most. Maybe they're addicted to it because power warps you in tremendously terrible ways. Joe Biden was in big trouble when Joe Scarborough said this.
Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second. And I've known him for years. The Brzezinskis have known him for 50 years. If it weren't the truth, I wouldn't say it.
But he did it to curry favor with power, to aggrandize himself, to be relevant, to be in the game, to be the president's guy, his advisor, his go-to guy, the most powerful host in morning television. And then he lost. And part of the reason he lost was because he was swallowed up by the media lie that no person did more to advance and perpetrate on the American people than Joe Scarborough. He just wanted to be in the room, like Lindsey Graham. There's no difference. And this notion that Mika would dare to compare their station to her father's, the national security advisor to the president of the United States, and to say that it was necessary for them to speak to Trump in the way that Brzezinski brought Begin and Sadat together.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike.
Come on. It's not quite obscene, but it's silly. And it represents a real disconnect from place in the world. Self-importance is a good thing. It's good to know your value, but it's also good to keep the ego in check and to understand, if you have the privilege to look into the camera, that you have an obligation to tell the truth. And so in this moment, every person that's used the word fascist to describe fascistic behavior has been undermined by a person who obviously did not mean a word of it. In this moment, the American people deserve truth. For example, the House Ethics Committee Matt Gaetz report. Despite what Speaker Johnson says, there is no precedent that keeps us from seeing it. We must fight for the truth. We must fight to know what is real, because we must fight through a fog of bullshit that is as thick as any that has ever been. And so now my question is, for hours every day on NBC News, how can you believe these people? How do you know what it is they're omitting? How do you know what it is that they're asking? What's the motive? What's the intent? Where's the fear? There have been few instances that I can remember where two people together have so thoroughly and spectacularly immolated through a charade that was revealed on live TV. A remarkable moment in a cynical age that will get darker, more dangerous, more dishonest by the month. Mark my words. This is The Warning. I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning, and I invite you to subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.